Two bird strikes, two very different outcomes. US Airways 1549, famously known as Miracle on the Hudson, and Jeju Air 2216, which is one of the worst crashes in recent history. We know that the transponder and the black boxes on the Jeju Air aircraft stopped working 4 minutes before impact. As discussed in one of my previous Spanish language videos, this suggests a major electrical failure where neither the left nor right engine-driven generator were working. But the question I keep seeing in the comments of my previous videos is, why didn't the crew of Jeju Air turn on the APU like Captain Sully did in Miracle on the Hudson? To understand this, I wanted to look at a few factors. Both airports have similar airport elevation, so the difference is about 30 feet, which isn't significant enough to make a big difference in a conversation where we are making some generalizations. US Airways Flight 1549 was climbing out of LaGuardia Airport when it struck birds at approximately 2,800 feet. Jeju Air 2216, on the other hand, was on final approach to Muan International Airport when they struck birds somewhere between 1,300 and 1,800 feet, according to the ADS-B data we have before everything stopped transmitting. This means there was a difference of somewhere between 1,000 and 1,400 feet between the two incidents. Altitude translates directly to time. This is a giant generalization because there are a lot of factors included here, and there's a lot of information that we're missing. But commercial aircraft typically glide at about 1,700 feet per minute with no engine power. So in this case, even if they only had 1,000 feet more for Miracle on the Hudson, that would have meant more time to diagnose, decide, and act. Another important factor to consider is the phase of flight, which impacts the aircraft's configuration and power setting. So for US Airways 1549, where the bird strike happened on climb out after takeoff, this would mean that the aircraft had takeoff power set and was in a clean configuration, which means flaps retracted and gear up. This minimizes drag and optimizes glide performance. In contrast, Jeju Air 2216 was on final approach with a low power setting, and according to observer videos, flaps and landing gear at least partially deployed, creating additional drag and accelerating the descent. Additionally, aircraft on final approach are moving at much lower speeds than those in climb. Jeju Air's reduced speed meant it was operating closer to its stall threshold, making it harder to control after an engine failure. By comparison, the Miracle on the Hudson aircraft had more airspeed, which provided better glide performance and reduced the immediate risk of a stall. Another factor is how the APU works in a Boeing 737-800 versus an Airbus A320, which was what the aircraft was for the Miracle on the Hudson. Both aircraft have APUs that are designed to provide backup power, but there are differences in how long it takes to start each one. To sum it up, an A320 APU gives you electrical power available in 30 seconds and full functionality in 1 minute, versus the APU in the 737, which provides electrical power in 45 seconds and full functionality in 1.5 to 2 minutes. So the US Airways A320 could have provided electrical power from the APU within 30 seconds of activation, critical for restarting systems. While Jeju Air's 737 also had an APU, the crew's limited time at a lower altitude, as well as their lower power setting and slower speed, meant they probably did not have enough time to turn on the APU before impact. After declaring their mayday due to a bird strike and losing electrical power at 8:59 local time, the pilots of Jeju Air would have only had their backup instruments available to them. In a complete electrical failure on a Boeing 737, as the Jeju Air flight seems to have had, pilots only have access to the airspeed indicator, altimeter, vertical speed indicator, turn coordinator, and magnetic compass. In a moment like this, the only choice is to go back to flying manually, using whatever backup instruments remain functional. These instruments allow for basic control of the aircraft, even without modern avionics. works. It's not easy, but it's possible. From what we know, the pilots of Jeju Air did an amazing job getting that airplane back on the runway under some pretty intense conditions. The US Airways flight benefited not only from the additional altitude they had, but also from being in a phase of flight where the workload was more evenly distributed. On final approach, the Jeju Air Flight crew had to pivot instantly from landing preparations to managing an engine out situation, which is a pretty dramatic shift that adds cognitive and procedural strain. This left the crew of Jeju Air with little to no room for error, and still they managed to put the aircraft down on the runway. From the evidence available, we know that the right engine ingested birds and suffered a compressor stall, as we've all seen in that video. Despite this, the right engine seemed to be operational at least to some extent during the belly landing, from the visible exhaust and the audible sounds that we could observe in another one of the videos of Jeju Air's accident, although it is unclear how much of any thrust the engine was producing. In contrast, it doesn't seem that the left engine was operating. There was no visible exhaust in the video of the landing. When we look at this thumbnail picture of the two engines that I got from Maximus Aviation, when we see the engines that were recovered after the Jeju aircraft, we also see that there is damage in the right engine, consistent with it operating, and that the left engine suffered much less damage, which would seem to confirm the theory that the right engine was operating, but the left engine was not. This is what has led so many people to speculate that the crew shut off the wrong engine after the bird strike, although we don't know for sure what exactly was happening with the engines because of the missing data from the flight recorder. So the Jeju air crash leaves us with more questions than answers. Why did they have to return so quickly? Why were the flaps and landing gear not deployed? How much time did the crew really have to prepare for the emergency landing? So while we may never know what caused the systems to fail and exactly what they were dealing with or how the crew managed the situation, one thing is clear. No matter what malfunctions occurred or what mistakes the crew may have made, the unforgiving design of that barrier at the end of the runway is what sealed the fate of Jeju Air 2216. This is a stark reminder of the importance of runway safety zones, the runway environment, and international regulations for the runway safety area. Jeju Air is a tragic case. It shows us the critical role of backup systems, the skill of the pilots in a moment of crisis, and especially in this case, the importance of eliminating hazards like runway end barriers. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.